Hi everybody, I'm here today to talk about two X-Men Epic Collections, Volume 22, Legacy, and a reprint of Volume 5, Second Genesis. Let's take a look inside these books, and then afterwards we'll come back and talk about the rest of these X-Men Epic Collections. Okay, let's take a look inside these books. I think we're going to start with the reprint, so let's get this one out of the way. I have with me a first edition and the new second edition of this Second Genesis book, and right off the bat you can see that the logo is different. Typically, the reprints don't change the logo, so why did they do it here? Big question. And the best I can guess is that maybe they wanted to make this a more era-accurate logo than it was before. X-Men 50 saw the debut of a brand new logo by Jim Steranko, and it's one that they've been using on all of the Epic Collection covers. But it only lasted for 10 issues before they switched the logo to be slightly different. You can see the letters get spread out more and the drop shadow isn't nearly as thick, so you can see the outlines here. You can see space between the N and the E. It's not exactly the same logo, but this is the logo that X-Men used all throughout the 80s and all throughout the 90s, but it's not reflected that way on the covers of the Epic Collections. They use the old logo all the way up until Mutant Genesis. So I assume that they changed the logo here to be more era appropriate, so it would be the same as the logos that you would find inside the book. Other than that, the only other big difference in this book is that the new edition puts a little subtitle at the top of the back cover, which was missing in the first edition. The X-Men are reborn. Everything else is the same, except for the price, of course. The other thing to note with this new edition is that the pages are nice and white. The old paper from R.R. Donnelly was prone to yellowing, so there are a lot of yellowing early Epic Collections out there. The paper from Solisco printers is the same width, the same weight as the old paper from R.R. Donnelly, but all of the epics that have been using this paper haven't been turning yellow, so I think we've got a winner here. Just a quick look inside so you can see that the colors are printed nice and vibrant as they were before. Just going to do a quick little flip on here because this is just a reprint. You can see that it just looks beautiful. And the artwork in here from John Byrne and Dave Cockrum is so much fun. Full of energy. Just classic X-Men comics. You're going to love this one if you haven't read it already. Okay, let's move on to this next one here, Legacies. There's a look at the spine. Gambit's on the spine there. And the back cover. Magneto and Strife cast a long shadow over mutant kind. We have a $45 price tag. And there's a look at the contents. And I happen to have a copy of this old trade called A Skinning of Souls, which collects the adjectiveless X-Men issues that are found in here, but none of the Uncanny issues. This book goes up to X-Men Volume 2, number 23. This one goes up to 24. So there's still one more issue that hasn't been in the Epic Collections yet. So I don't know, do I get rid of this trade or not? Probably going to, because I'm pretty confident that we're going to see more X-Men Epic Collections. But if you're the kind that can't part with that, then you're going to want to hang on to this one a little bit longer. I brought this one out primarily because I want to show you the quality of the scans in both of these books. Let's open up this one first. Sometimes if you have bad scans, the gray patterns or the dot patterns create this weird illusion where it kind of looks like polka dots. It's called a moire effect. You can see that in the clothing here. You can see it come up in this mist. Pretty much on every page, you can see it all over. It's especially prominent on some covers. Look at that. All of the gray in the background here looks like polka dots. Well, I'm happy to say that this new edition solves all of these problems. The polka dots are gone. And if you're like me, you can now sit back and enjoy these stories without the silly polka dots. In this volume of X-Men, the team is trying to recover after learning all about Strife and facing the horror that was Strife. We're introduced to a brand new villain called Omega Red, and Andy Kubert is the guy who's doing all of the pencils on this. This is after the Image guys have all left. We're left with people who are trying to fill in the stylistic gaps of the people who left to form Image. And I think they do a pretty good job. Andy Kubert, of course, is definitely up there in fantastic 90s artists. This volume has some great stories concerning Colossus and Illyana. Includes this landmark 300 issue. Some nice artwork from John Romita Jr. And as a Generation X fan, I have to point out that we have Chris Bichello's early work on the pages of X-Men Unlimited #1. And this volume has the return of Betsy Braddock. And if you know anything about Betsy's past or her history, Psylocke has a very interesting connection with the character. So we're going to have to see what that is all about when you read this book here. Long-standing villains like Mr. Sinister and his Wild Pack are here. And there are a lot of bonus features in the back here. Different articles from different magazines, interviews with creators, previews about what else was happening in the Marvel Universe, and of course, pages from the swimsuit issues. So where are we with the X-Men Epic Collections? Well, we only really have 14 volumes out of a possible 22 so far. That's falling behind some of the other long-running ones like Thor and Captain America, but I'm sure they're going to catch up sooner or later. But in the meantime, let's talk about these books here. The first 3 volumes collect the early days of X-Men, featuring the original teen heroes Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, Angel, and Iceman, and features Professor Xavier and Magneto, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and some of the most popular X-Men villains that have become mainstays in X-Men comics ever since. The book started off with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby setting the ground rules and defining who these characters are, and then after that, Werner Roth and Roy Thomas took over the book and brought us through Volume 2, Lonely Are the Hunted, and then in Volume 3, The Sentinels Live, is when Neil Adams and Jim Steranko become artists on this book and give X-Men a very different visual look. They all get new costumes, and especially Jim Steranko plays with the panel layouts and does some really cool stuff here. Unfortunately, at the time, the sales weren't great, and these new changes and additions to the cast were not enough to save the book, and it got canceled. And that's where we have this book here, Volume 4, It's Always Darkest Before the Dawn. This is the period during X-Men's hiatus. The title wasn't actually canceled, it just went into reruns, and so you can see here on the back cover, it does list that the covers from X-Men 67 to 93 are included in this book, but it's just the covers. The rest of the book is made up of appearances of X-Men and X-Men related characters as they appear in other people's books, because a lot of their storylines are continued. The most prominent one being Amazing Adventures numbers 11 to 17, which is the transformation of the Beast. Great story by Steve Englehart. X-Men Omnibus fans are jealous of this volume because it's not collected in the Omnibus format. They kind of just skip right over it. After that, we get to some of the most famous and most popular X-Men stuff out there. This is the beginning of the Claremont run, starting with Giant Size X-Men #1, where we are introduced to a brand new cast of X-Men. They are the new team, and Chris Claremont, along with the help of John Byrne, really launched X-Men into stardom and into popularity. These 2 volumes, Second Genesis and Proteus, are some of the best X-Men comics out there. But when I say the best, it's actually maybe slightly second best, because we have here Volume 7, The Dark Phoenix Saga, which to some people is one of the best X-Men stories ever told. Between this volume here, Volume 7 and Volume 8, you've got a host of great stories by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, and then after John Byrne leaves, we have Dave Cockrum coming in to keep the ball rolling and really defining the look of X-Men through the early 80s. Volume 9's coming, it's called The Brood Saga, and it's going to be coming later in 2023. And after that, we have a small gap of just Volume 10 and 11 missing in the little puzzle here before we get to this volume here, The Gift. There's a lot crammed into this volume, including a 2-part crossover with Alpha Flight and a Nightcrawler miniseries. You have some really great artwork in here from John Romita Jr., Barry Windsor Smith, and Dave Cockrum. Classic mid-80s X-Men for all of you fans of the Bronze Age. I know that's just one volume. It's kind of a standalone between 2 gaps. We're missing volume 13 to 16. We don't know when they're coming yet. They should be arriving at some point because they've been releasing X-Men on a pretty steady basis. We'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, we can move ahead to volume 17, Disillusion and Rebirth. This is an odd point of X-Men as the team grows so big with the various different X-teams that they don't know what to do with themselves. What's prominent about this book is that it's the beginning of Jim Lee's run on X-Men, and of course, Jim Lee is one of the most famous X-Men creators out there. Then we've got another little hole. Volume 18 is going to be the Extinction Agenda, but we don't have that one yet. Don't know when it's coming. Volume 19 closes off Chris Claremont's long run on X-Men. This is 1991, and it also has the launch of the brand new X-Men Volume 2 #1, one of the best-selling comics of all time. Volume 20, Bishop's Crossing, has the debut of, you guessed it, Bishop. X-Men was never bigger than it was in the early 90s, and these volumes are the reason for it. So if you want a piece of X-Men history, check these ones out for sure. Volume 21, Executioner's Song, is almost exactly the same as X-Force Epic Collection Volume 2, which is also called Executioner's Song. However, that volume has a few extra X-Force related issues. This volume instead has a few extra X-Men related issues. And so some of this stuff hasn't been collected in color trade paperback, so it's a good thing we have these volumes here, along with Volume 22, Legacies, which I've already talked about. So that's it for X-Men Epic Collections. Where is this line going to go after this? Well, they've got a lot of holes to fill, like we've been talking about, and they keep pushing the end date as we've seen with Volume 22. Where do the X-Men Epic Collections stop? That's a great guess. I don't know. It could go on for a very long time. It actually takes quite a long time for X-Men to change their style to fit what I would consider to be modern as opposed to 90s or even a holdover on the 90s. In fact, it might even be New X-Men and the Grant Morrison run of Uncanny X-Men that prompts the modern era X-Men Epic Collections. We're gonna have to wait and see. We don't know yet. And that's it for X-Men Epic Collections. Thanks everybody for joining me on this run. I know I had a great time going through these books with you, and I hope you did too. If you've got any questions on X-Men Epic Collections, send me a comment and I will do my best to answer. Thanks.